one of the elders, a guy named Isaac Russell. Russell has he actually has a history of believing he's possessed. And the other elders think he's out of his mind, right?
This is the Relief Society president.
Oh.
So all you have to do...
literally have to walk around with a casserole all night?
Yes, that's what you do.
Can't go camping now because Kane's going to climb down your chimney, so watch out.
That's right.
But now you know how to stop him.
You guys are endowed. You're set. You can handle
Keep a fire in the chimney every night.
That's right.
It's good to know.
Happy Halloween and welcome to the Third Hour podcast where we discuss church culture and real topics within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints like ghosts and evil spirits. My name is Mimi and I am your co-host, joined like always with my co-host Eric.
Actually, you're joined by a ghost today.
Not just a ghost though.
The Holy Ghost.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
I feel
very
like
spooky.
It's like such a good, easy costume that was like if you need something last minute.
I spent hours on this.
I was literally in our baby's room feeding him and he just walks in like, ooh.
Yeah, luckily he wasn't scared. I mean, I guess I don't know about luckily.
Scared.
It's supposed to be scary, right? But
he was
he's
laughing.
just kind of staring.
Well, I don't know if you can tell who I am. This might help. I was going to cover this because it's kind of bloody.
That's just how life is.
I know, but I don't want this video to get taken down.
Do you think they washed them before they brought the arms in?
That's a good question. You can see the bone.
Well, you don't have to hold that up.
Well, I know. That's why I'm covering it. If you can't tell, I'm Ammon, and this was one of the many arms that I just severed. So,
dang, girl, look at you.
I know. I was trying to think of a way I could scare you with this when I got home, but kind of missed it. Yeah,
here.
right? Oh, yeah, that's creepy. Oh, okay. Thank you. So, these are our costumes. We wanted to do churchy costumes.
Okay, this is not working for me.
Oh my god.
All right. There we go.
Now you look like I don't know what you look like.
I'm a ghost.
Yeah,
Spooky.
okay. We can go with that. I will say though, in this episode, we want to talk about some last minute Halloween costume ideas, but later in the episode, our main whole thing of this main topic is we talk to Chris and Christine Blythe all about LDS Folklore, which they'll explain what exactly that is, but they share some ghost stories. It's kind of spooky, but then some good ghost stories too. So about deceased loved ones and stuff. So anyway, stay tuned for that. We'll have timestamps in the description, but first we wanted to give some last minute LDS Halloween costume ideas. I know not everyone likes to dress super churchy, but maybe you have your ward Halloween party coming up. So we wanted to give you some fun ideas.
I feel like those are usually before Halloween though, so they're probably past, honestly.
Oh, maybe.
But if you're gonna go trick or treat at your bishop's house, he'll love it and he'll give you the whole bowl of candy. So, might as well.
So the first two, obviously, you can copy our ideas. You can be, any Nephite you want. I wanted to be Ammon so I could get this arm, but this is super easy costumes. I mean, both of these were actually curtains that I just picked up at Savers, and we just kind of ripped them up a little bit, and I'm just wearing brown, and yeah, that's basically all you need. This was $10 on Amazon, which is a steal, honestly.
Yeah. For your ghosts, I got to recommend, you might want to line up the eye holes better than I did.
Yeah, yours were kind
so
of
you could wear it the whole night.
You know what you look like? A 101 Dalmatian.
Oh, easily a convertible costume. Yeah. I'm now a Dalmatian.
Even when you had the eye holes, it kind of was like that. It's very cute. Let's look at some other ideas that I found online, and then we have some that we thought of. So... well, this one I think would be great. So this obviously isn't Bigfoot. This is Kane. So we actually talk about that later with Chris and Christine as well, which is super funny. They have a fun story about that.
You could even say it's just Goliath and he's hairy.
I mean, yeah. Well,
Who knows if he was
What
hairy?
if you're short?
And it could also be Esau, right? They say he was super hairy.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe. I'd go with Cain. I feel like that's funny. I feel like, honestly, we should have them back into a whole episode about, like, where that came from. I mean, do you know anything about, like, why people think Cain is Bigfoot?
Because they say Cain was cursed to live on the earth all his days.
Mm-hmm.
So then, like, that's where the idea is that he's still around.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe there's some random quote from some apostle or prophet back in the day that was like, I was riding a horse and there was a man just as tall as I was. He came up to me and I was like, holy crap, I'm scared. And then he's like, I'm Cain. And he was like, whoa, get away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So wait,
I'm pretty sure
why,
that was a word for word perfect rendition of what they said.
why would he be tall and hairy though?
Great question. No idea.
Okay, interesting. We will have
He
to look into that.
also may not have actually been hairy at all by any of these accounts. People linking like Bigfoot. All we know is he's got big feet, right?
Then
But,
how come he's
usually he's a tall
hairy?
guy. I mean, Sasquatch is kind of.
Are those
that
not
one.
the same?
I
thought
feel
those
like
were
they're
the
different
same.
versions of the same kind of folklore.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you guys are interested in a whole episode about this, I am certainly interested in looking into it. So let us know. But that's one idea. Next, we've got the armor of God.
Okay. Yeah, simple. I mean, you might just have some armor laying around your house you could pull out, put it on. I mean, if you've invested in a suit of armor, then you really want to get your money's worth out of it. So bust it out for Halloween.
Yeah. And you could even tape like a little CTR logo on the front. I feel like that
Or
would
like
be
the word
cute.
Satan with like an X through it.
Okay, next, you may be wondering what this is.
Yeah, grandma.
No, it's the Relief
your grandma.
Society. It does look like my grandma. No, this is the Relief Society president.
Oh,
So all you have to
literally have
do-
to walk around with a casserole all night.
Yes, that's what you do. You don't have to be old because there's some
Can
younger
you use a
ones.
casserole
but
dish as like how you collect your candy, or does it have to have a casserole
oh
in
my
it?
gosh, you need to pass out the candy from the casserole dish.
Or if you trade like carrots for candy.
You can dig it. But yeah, I feel like this is pretty easy.
Yeah, you just raid your mom's closet.
Yeah.
Regardless of what age you are, your mom is older, so then it works.
Yeah. There you go. I thought this was fun.
Oh, that seems a little bit tricky to make, honestly, for last minute.
That's true. I mean,
But,
if
I mean,
two
there's-
elders have time to make it on their mission.
Well, that could just mean something about them. I'm sure they had
Hopefully
a
they
P
never
day
see
where their
this.
apartment was already clean. They had all their groceries covered, so they just got to work. But I mean, you could do this a lot less legit than them and still be recognizable.
And I think it's cute for like a duo, for missionaries or like a couple, because they work together.
Yeah, and you can name it like your kids, like a little Pearl of Great Price, little Doctrine and Covenants.
Oh my gosh, we should have done that. We have to do that next year.
There you go.
That would be really cute.
You could have like a stepchild that's there, and it could be like the Apocrypha.
Oh my gosh. What would you do if you're pregnant? You could be like a triple combination. Oh my gosh, if you were pregnant with twins or triplets,
Whoa.
like triple combination.
There you go.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like things yet to be revealed to be on.
Oh, like the small plates or the big plate. I don't know when ones are not revealed yet. The large plates.
No, I just meant like that, from the Article of Faith.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that or the whatever plates, large or small. Oh my gosh. I'm really exposing myself right now. Okay.
We got both actually.
So other ideas. These are ones that we just thought of, so we don't have pictures to show. But this be a Nephite, but then add like some really cool sunglasses and like a ton of jewelry and just act kind of judgy. And then you are a
Zoramite.
yes. I actually almost was that because I just think it's kind of fun.
It would have been a little too on the nose for her, though, I think.
Someone has called me a not called me a Zoramite, but
No, they
they've
said
been
you were
like,
being. Actually, no,
they
they
sent
did it real
me-
low key. They literally
Yeah.
just sent the scripture verse and said, "Oh, this is you," and then it was like the Ram Yum Tum prayer.
yeah, like no joke. It wasn't even someone from like Instagram. It was like someone from real life. They didn't even really know me. It's a long story, but I
If
have
you're still
never been
watching
more
this, like-
offended.
Yikes!
No, I'm blocking them immediately. Okay. That's one idea. Sorry, that sounded kind of Zoramite-ish.
See, now you know where they were coming from.
I do.
Maybe they weren't wrong.
Another idea is to be a Utah mom. I almost made Eric do this, but all you
Maybe
need...
a Utah mom?
Yeah, it'd be funny. So all you need is like a blonde wig and then a Stanley cup or a Swig cup or So Delicious, anything, one of those.
And then bring
what
a
else?
child with you with a name tag that says Chicken Lee.
Mm-hmm. We love Jane. If you can't tell, if you don't follow Very Jane on Instagram, she does these great videos that are like Utah mom parodies. If anybody knows her, we would love to have her on as a guest.
What's wild is like people think she's not being ironic.
Really?
Like there are people that thought her child's name was actually Chicken Lee,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
which is wild.
Wild. We did that episode on Utah names. It's not too far of a stretch, honestly.
It is.
A, B, C, D, E, or Chicken Lee.
I'm still not confident those are real, actually done.
No.
There are people making jokes.
Those are real. Like people
Show me a
said.
birth certificate.
If you haven't seen that episode, we'll have it linked. But anyway, we react to the most unique Utah names.
The worst Utah names. If this is your child's name, we're throwing down on
Oh
you.
my gosh, no. But there's some really unique ones. So anyway, yeah. What else for Utah mom? Utah mom starter kit. Oh, maybe like a crossbody bag, like workout clothes, or
Some
just
essential
like
oils, like in like a
Ooh.
bandolier, like an ammo bandolier, but it's all essential oils in it.
that would be really funny.
There you go.
You could just be like a doTERRA distributor at that point. Like just make that your costume. That'd be funny.
Could do that too.
I would also do like, if you don't do athleisure, just like floral dress with like one of those hats, that are really trendy, the Christian girl hat. Yeah, I think that's basically it for the starter kit. So Utah mom, I think that's a fun last minute costume idea. Okay, another one. We were thinking of like Utah culture, church culture kind of things, but the green jello, because that's like
I don't know what that
thing.
looks like. But
I was thinking just like a green, one of those full body green suits.
Oh, morph suit?
Mm-hmm.
See, I was thinking like one of those cheap green plastic tablecloths from like Party City,
Oh,
and then you
mhm.
just cut a hole for your head.
Yeah.
And then you could just tape some like carrot emojis or whatever to you.
Oh my gosh, the carrot. See, it's so funny about the green jello because I've never like seen that or had that. Have
Yeah.
you?
No, I think anyone I've been around has the good sense to not put vegetables in their jello, but
Well, it's just like a thing. Like church culture people are like, oh yeah, we brought that
everyone
to our
jokes about
ward
it.
party. Yeah, everyone jokes about it, but I'm
Yeah.
like, I've never actually, maybe it's a little bit before our time.
I think it's phased out. People started branching out. They started doing frog eye salad and other things instead.
See, I don't even know what that is.
Or like jello salad.
Okay.
It's like instead of
how is
just
that-
doing the jello, they put Cool Whip in the jello, mix that up, throw some stuff in
Is
there.
there still carrots?
No, usually it's fruit.
Oh, okay. That seems
And
better.
cottage cheese, I think, is the frog eye part of the salad.
Okay. That sounds really gross.
'Cause it's
Sorry.
healthy.
If you that and that's why they call it a salad.
It's got fruit and cheese. It's healthy.
Oh my gosh, that's insane. Okay. Last
It's actually pretty
one.
good, though.
You've had it?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Eric.
Why do you sound disappointed in me?
I am disappointed in you.
I've attended many church events in my lifetime and eaten at them, so I've had frog eye salad.
It's not just one of the ones you avoid and you're like, ugh. Isn't it always sad that when you're at like a ward party and like everything is like there's half of it left or less than half left, and then there's one thing that's just like full, like one plate. You just feel bad. That's probably the frog eye salad.
No, that one goes quick.
That's insane. If
People
you
get
like
hyped.
frog eye salad, I'm sorry. I guess I don't know. I've never had it. Maybe.
Mimi also
I
hates
should try.
casseroles, though. We're getting way off track
Yeah, we
here,
are.
but
We are.
she just doesn't like things mixed together like that in general. I feel like so.
Oh, we could do a whole episode about this, about me not liking casseroles because
Let's
this
not.
cheese does not belong on rice. Please at me. Like I will have this fight any day of the week.
It's so good though.
It's just not how it was meant to be. And
Did you know
casseroles,
there
I
are
just
more
can't.
than one culture in the world, and people can eat rice different ways?
They can, but I don't think it's right. I just don't. And like a casserole, I'm sorry, just like dumping cream of chicken, cream of mushroom, like put some, I don't know what else
Chicken,
even goes on
broccoli,
it.
rice or
Just-
potatoes.
Ugh.
Delicious.
Okay.
You can get fancy, put some breadcrumbs on the top there, get gourmet.
Oh man. Okay. Well,
now I'm getting hungry.
I'm actually hungry talking about this, but I'm just hungry. It's not from that. Okay. Last idea, because I want to have time to get into the interview, not have this be too long. But this one I'm very proud of. Should I explain the components? And
You're
then you
proud
guess
of
what
it?
it is?
Like you came up with this on your own? Was the
I
idea?
did come up with this on my own.
She didn't, guys. It's not original.
Are you serious?
I mean, you might have thought you thought of it on your own, but it is not that original.
I have never seen anyone do this, and I did think of it from my brain.
When you literally said, hey, what are like some church costume ideas? It was like the first thing that came to mind.
Okay, well, let me have you guys guess, because I guess he already knows. All you need is church clothes, an apron, and a stake. And who are you? The stake president.
That's not that original, babe. It's not a bad idea.
Have you ever seen someone dress up like that?
No one wants to carry a steak around all night.
Well, like a pretend steak.
That's true from your kid's kitchen set.
Yeah.
Or like your niece or nephew. You steal it from their kitchen.
Or just even like a little Ruth's Chris gift card.
People will be mugging you on the streets. You gotta watch out.
That's true. Anyway, if you liked any of these ideas, let us know. If you end up using any of them, send us pictures because we need to see.
Send it to our email. thirdhourpodcast at more.
I actually don't even know if the email is active.
Yikes.
Message it to us on Instagram is probably your best bet. Oh my gosh. Sorry, my outfit. How did Ammon do it? Like, was
Probably
his
actually
robe falling
fit him.
off when he was like chopping off the arms?
Was he even wearing a robe?
Or, I mean, I don't know. He must have had something on like this.
Maybe. Or like a shirt.
I don't think they had shirts. No, they had the robe like this. I was in the Book of Mormon videos and no one was wearing just like a shirt.
We all know is actually a documentary from people who have eyewitness accounts of what they wore.
Yeah,
right?
no, they didn't really know. But can you imagine them wearing a t-shirt? No, I can't.
I didn't say t-shirt. I just meant a shirt. Like
Like,
it would have been. I mean, could have been like sort of poncho, like
Yeah, that's like this.
No, see, like mine stays on.
Oh,
over
okay.
both
They did
shoulders.
have some like that on the Book of Mormon videos, actually.
There you go.
Anyway.
So,
we're getting
on that
off
note,
topic.
those are some of the costumes we came up with. Feel free to comment some others for anyone who's literally like 2 days from Halloween, doesn't know what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we will swing right into the interview.
Thank you so much to Chris and Christine Blythe for joining us today. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here. So if you guys don't know these two, I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit, but they have a podcast called Angels and Seer Stones that I am a huge fan of. These two have so much knowledge. And yeah, I would love to hear just a little bit about you guys and a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah. You want to start?
Well, sure. So I'm Christine Blythe, and I have a master's degree in folklore. For about 4 years, I worked at BYU as the folklore archivist there. So I had a lot of
Is that like a
opportunities.
common kind of like major in folklore? Like, were you like the only person, or is that like a big?
was
I've
just
never
me.
even heard of that as a major. Okay.
There are a couple of folklore programs in the United States and a few that are international, but there's at this point probably 6 or 7 folklore programs at the master's and PhD level. And so I went to University of Newfoundland in Canada, which was an incredible experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if you asked me if I was going to end up with a job, I probably would have said probably not, but here we are. I found a way to
But
use
you
that
loved it, so it's
credential.
good.
Yes.
Yeah, I've loved it. It's been wonderful.
Christine, when we had a baby that was a year old, like you guys have now, Christine had our family pack up. I was finishing my dissertation and she said, let's go to Newfoundland and Canada, which is kind of the most magical spot in Canada. This place where it snows, the piles of snow go up way beyond your head, just walking down the streets, and people still believe in fairies. And so we went there and Christine studied for a while and it was a real blast. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a unique experience. I spent the first 3 weeks of that of my master's degree living in this tiny little town. And we went out and we interviewed people and we talked about their beliefs, and we looked at vernacular architecture, the old homes and how they were built, and it was a fishing village. Anyways, it was an incredible experience. And so that's what I did for the past 4 or 5 years. I was the folklore archivist at BYU. And then more recently, about a year and a half ago, I took a position as the executive director of the Mormon History Association. So that's what I'm doing full time right now.
But Christine didn't mention probably
Wow.
the coolest thing about her, which is she is a regular talking head on Fox Nation's Monsters Across America show. So if your audience is
Whoa.
interested
There
in
you
Provo
go.
Bigfoot or 1,000 other random monsters,
New Jersey Devil, or anyways.
right? Very fun.
That's the coolest.
Isn't that neat? Christine and I met at Utah State. I was a master's student and she was an undergrad. And I was working with Phil Barlow, who was the first Mormon studies chair ever to be hired. And we became good friends and we got married and we have 3 boys. And I first, after our degrees there, was accepted at Florida State for my PhD in religion. I had already fallen in love with folklore. Utah State's one of these great folklore hubs. So I used folklore as my method, but I went to a religion program. And then I've worked for, Joseph Smith Papers for 3 years. I was at the Maxwell Institute for several years. And have just been in the English department as a folklore professor for the past few years. And something that me and Christine have in common is we're both converts to the church. We joined when we were teenagers. And so we're kind of pioneering a new family line of Latter-day Saints now. So something we're proud of.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Awesome.
It's incredible. Thank you again for being on. It's such an honor to have you. And I do just have one request that you tell us more about. Could you define folklore? Because I don't know about you, but for me, anytime I hear that, I think of like an old man with a banjo on his porch, like bringing all the kids around to tell them stories.
Yeah, or just like something made up or
Right.
a wives' tale, something like that. Yeah.
So you guys do like Latter-day Saint folklore. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so folklore you're right. That is exactly what it is. It could be someone playing the banjo on the porch. It could be a storyteller. I think most of the time when people talk about folklore, they're thinking about fairy tales, Little Red Riding Hood, Beauty and the Beast, right? But they are, these traditions that groups of people create and share from one generation from the next. And these traditions kind of shift as they move forward from one person to another. And so we're talking about legends, we're talking about personal narratives, we're talking about foodways. So if we're going to give Mormon examples, right? The funeral potato, right? Green Jello, these cinnamon rolls that mom and dad make on General Conference morning that we eat. We're talking about 3 Nephite stories that we share. But we're also talking about the very personal beliefs that Latter-day Saints hold. And so as we think about the afterlife, maybe today we're going to talk about some supernatural things, those very personal beliefs that we hold and we share and we talk about with our family, we develop as we read the scriptures, that itself is also folklore.
Absolutely. And so often in the classroom, we stress folklore is something passed orally or between individuals, one or the other. It's not mass produced. So, when you go on YouTube and you see traditional Louisiana cooking, it's no longer spreading as folklore usually does. It's mass. It's sent out to 1,000 people at once. Whereas folklore is more that mother teaches her daughter, and so on. And we also really emphasize the idea that folklore is story. It's believed, it's sometimes believed, and it's passed down and taken seriously. But the idea of it being false may be the case. I mainly study contemporary legends, or what we call urban legends. And the key here is that they're unprovable when we're talking about a legend, right? I don't know if Cain is Bigfoot and he's walking in the mountains here. It's an unprovable idea, right? I think it's probably
You
not
could
right,
prove it.
but it
Just
doesn't
be there.
matter.
Talk to him.
That's right. We could go out and see him, and then it becomes something different than folklore, right?
Just
It becomes
catch him.
journalism. Absolutely.
Once you recognize what folklore is, you start to see it everywhere. It's this cultural, this unifying cultural glue that holds us all together, the thing that unites us as a people, which is why I think folklore is so exciting. I think as converts, as Chris mentioned, that's why LDS folklore is so exciting to the two of us, because we weren't born in this tradition, right? We came in, we had to learn the stories, we had to become a part of a people. And so, it's just really exciting, I think, folklore.
And it does something different when we study Latter-day Saints through a folklore dimension. So we are the statements from prophets, official worship and sacrament meetings. These are all important things. We love them. But what we study is how individual Latter-day Saints practice their religion at home, or conversations they have with friends, this sort of informal level, and also interpretation, right? There's a lot of things Latter-day Saints we're left to interpret. We're left to make decisions. The easy examples are, what do you tithe off of? Or how do you keep the Sabbath day? These preferences. That's all great examples of folklore, or we'd even call it vernacular religion, is the term we use.
Or lived religion.
Lived religion.
Yeah.
So cool. I feel like it's so interesting because on our podcast, we talk a lot about church culture, and I'm seeing so many similarities. So between, like,
we're talking about church folklore, I guess. There you go.
Like, are we folklorists? No, because you guys you guys have like degrees and stuff. We're just two randos. But I'm just saying, if you like Third Hour podcast, you're gonna love Angels and Seer Storms, because like we talk about it and we joke about it, but like you guys know stuff, and like you have so many interesting episodes. Some things we'll talk about today, but like you guys have episodes about like the prayer circle and how we've seen that outside of the temple, and spirit children, and like we'll get into this a little bit, but like sleep paralysis and like demonic possessions, which is why we want to have you guys on for the Halloween episode. But anyway, plug for their podcast. You guys know
thanks.
So much. It's so cool to learn from you.
And Eric and Mimi, we are missionaries for folklore. So if you are ready to become folklorists, we want that.
That's right.
What does a folklore baptism look like?
It looks like this. It looks a lot like this. So
okay. Good. No blood, no weird circles.
That's
or
right.
anything. Good.
No, I'll be your modern day folklorist. I'll report on like, the soda shops, the Stanley
Yes.
cups, like all of the new. Yeah, let's do it.
get
You got it.
That's
You
good.
got it.
Well, anyway, we mentioned, this is our Halloween episode, and it was so funny trying to find a guest for this, because we're like, okay, who can we have on that's like church but can talk about ghosts and like stuff like this? And we were recommended to you guys. So if it's okay with you, I want to start with the question of like, as far as ghosts or spirits or things like that, does the church have a stance? Like, what does the church put out? Like, what do we believe about that kind of stuff?
It's a good question. And as a folklorist, like I automatically want to kick the question right back to you. Like, what do you think? Right. But we won't. In terms of what the church thinks, do we have official beliefs about ghosts? I guess the answer is yes and no, right? When we talk about ghosts, I think it's really perception, right? Like, what's a ghost? What is a spirit? It just depends on who you're asking, right? If we ask a regular Joe on the street, does he believe in ghosts? He may say yes, and then tell you about some sort of supernatural experience he's had. If you ask a Latter-day Saint to interpret that experience, they're probably going to say, oh, that was a spirit, right? It's a deceased person who's still, doing Heavenly Father's work or whatever it is, but it's going to be interpreted through a very specific Latter-day Saint lens. So we believe that people are spirits. We believe people are angels, right? And so,
I think that's right. Bruce R. McConkie in Mormon Doctrine, long ago, has an entry about haunting or ghosts. And he says, well, if there's a haunting, it's probably one of the 1/3, right? The fallen spirits that are doing this. He doesn't think that sort of the spirits in the spirit world, particularly wicked spirits in the spirit world, are having a lot of impact on us today. Now, that's different than what people thought in the 19th century. In fact, it was really common to think that you might be, an evil spirit might either be those that fell with Lucifer, or evil spirits that, evil men who have passed away. One of my favorite stories, can I tell a story? All right, one of my favorite stories, and you guys will probably be aware of this. This is Heber C. Kimball. He's famously, you've probably seen the church video where Heber C. Kimball, Joseph Smith comes over and whispers in his ear in the Kirtland Temple and says, we're sending you to England, right? The Spirit of the Lord tells me that my servant Heber needs to go across the oceans and preach the gospel. And so he does. He puts together this group of 6 missionaries. A few of them are from Canada, a few are from the United States, and they get together and they open England for the gospel. And when they get there, they have some conflicts. I won't get into the full story for our purposes, but they're going to have their first set of baptisms. That's 9 people set up to be baptized in England. And the night before the baptisms, one of the elders, a guy named Isaac Russell has he actually has a history of believing he's possessed. And the other elders think he's out of his mind, right? But he walks into Heber C. Kimball's bedroom. Heber C. Kimball's companion is Orson Hyde. They're both apostles in the church. And Isaac Russell says, if I don't get some help, I'm going to die. And so Heber C. Kimball jumps off the bed, and Orson Hyde just kind of turns his legs off the bed, and they give him a blessing. And when they do, Heber C. Kimball puts his hands on his head, and according to the story, he's thrown across the room and has this experience where he all of a sudden realizes that maybe Isaac Russell wasn't making this up. Later, another elder comes in, Willard Richards, and helps give Heber C. Kimball a blessing too. And then at some point after this, Willard Richards, who's going to be an apostle, and Orson Hyde and Heber C. Kimball are able to see into the spirit world. They call it the infernal world.
And this is spooky. Yeah.
This is really spooky. And Willard Richards is part of the story because he has a famous pocket watch. And so he looks at his pocket watch and he times it for 90 minutes where Heber C. Kimball and Orson Hyde are looking into the spirit world, and they see demons. And it's really scary.
Don't they describe one of them as like a cat face?
There's one account where they describe one of these figures as, they're really grotesque. One is half cat, half human, but they're really angry.
Oh my gosh, I'm thinking James Corden in the Cats movie.
Good. Creepy for sure.
That would be terrifying.
But whereas this story is told, last time it was told at conference was President Hinckley. So pretty recently. And you can still go to the spot in England where this occurred. But what's so interesting to me is that even though it's so grotesque, and they don't decide that these are like Lucifer and his minions, they believe these are evil men that lived in England. And so it's really common to think, if I'm being tempted, well, maybe if I'm being tempted to smoke a cigarette, well, it was someone who smoked a cigarette and has now gone to spirit prison, and they want to tempt me so they can get some of that feeling.
And this story is really interesting because you have echoes of it into modern missionary folklore. I think, yeah. And I know we've talked about a little bit on a previous podcast, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it this month too. But we have these missionary stories that mimic a lot of these details. So one that I think we featured is about a missionary who prays to the devil. Why? There's many variants. Sometimes it's because he wants to know if he's there. Sometimes it's because he's abandoned his faith. But he goes and he prays to the devil, and he goes upstairs. He kneels down, and his companion begins to hear sounds banging against the wall, the roof, just really awful sounds. And one a particular variant, there's a horse that comes rushing through the door and up the stairs. And when the companion finally gets to the room, he opens it up, and the missionary has body print is in the wall and in the ceiling, and is just a complete mess. In other stories, we have a Ouija board that happens to spawn possession, in a particular missionary. But a lot of these stories mimic this earlier narrative.
That's absolutely right. And so in the 19th century, you might have ghosts, literally ghosts that you're dealing with, but you might also have evil spirits. Today, we've done that transition. We really aren't interested in talking about ghosts in the same way. Now, that doesn't mean individual Latter-day Saints don't have ghost stories. We have tons. We love them.
Well, it definitely tells stories around the campfire still. We love a good ghost story. I have one myself that I tell all of the time. But I don't sit back and analyze it, right? Because if I do, then I probably do have to add some sort of LDS lens to it. And I don't want to destroy the ghost story by doing that. So, yeah. Anyways, ghosts do exist.
Good question.
So I guess a question then, which maybe this goes against the code of a folklorist, but these stories, does it start from someone making up a story and it kind of snowballs from there? Or do you think it comes from, obviously each story is a little different, some might be an exact experience someone had that's told very faithfully, and some are embellished more than others, and some could be totally made up. But is there like a trend you see where a lot of these kind of start a similar way, or is it kind of just each one is very unique?
Well, I think it's really, early on, folklorists wanted to find that very first story. Well, if I just keep tracking it back far enough, I'll find where it began. But we know that that's not possible. We can't do that. So long ago, folklorists abandoned that particular goal. It's a hard question to answer, right? I think missionaries are telling, or Latter-day Saints are telling these stories because they impact them in a lot of ways. Sometimes they're entertaining, sometimes they're terrifying, sometimes they teach us moral lessons about, good and evil, and help us to remain faithful to our covenants. I have heard personal narratives where people have told me about their companion who was possessed. In my mission, even, there was a young sister who was possessed that supposedly that had to receive a blessing. Gosh, I don't know. How do we answer that question right?
So I think that's right. But also, as we mentioned sleep paralysis or something, here's something that a lot of people have experienced, and stories come from it, right? Someone experiences, this is something that folklorists, scholars in general, recognize that people have sort of anomalous experiences related to. And then people tell that experience to someone, and then that story gets passed to another individual, and it might change a little bit, right? And those stories, just like our memories aren't perfect. We don't, tell the same story multiple times the same way. But it's also true when other people tell those stories, they're bound to change a little bit. But I should say, as a Latter-day Saint folklorist, I believe in the supernatural world. And so I really think these events sometimes happen. Now, I don't have like a testimony of individual events, right? If someone tells me they had a conversation with the devil, it's not like I'm going to integrate this and be like, let me tell you about the time Joe had a conversation with the devil. I'm not going to doubt him necessarily. But I think such a thing could be possible. I'm not a skeptic as a folklorist.
Yeah, one way or another, usually when you hear a bit of folklore, specifically these kind of legends, it begins like this. My friend's mother has a sister whose cousin told her this one important, whatever, right? And so there's so much distance between the storyteller and the person whose experience it belongs to.
The big one for us is like my missionary companions trainer before I got into the mission told him this story before he was there, and this is what the mission was like. We call these friends of a friend stories. So FOAF, if you're a folklorist, the kind of the abbreviation everybody uses.
And everyone's played telephone, right? And so there's a story, we tell it, And as it carries on from one person to another, it takes on its own life, right? It becomes something else. And so what it was at the beginning, whether it was a missionary who had an experience where he felt the power of Satan, and there was I don't know,
or saw an angel,
right? By the time it goes, down a few folks or generations or whatever, right, from one mission to another, it becomes its own thing. And
it accelerates and exaggerates, and so maybe a dark feeling turns into something
full-blown possession.
That's right, something very elaborate.
There's no perfect way to answer that question,
but it's a good one.
It is a great question.
No, that was great.
Yeah, I think that sets a good groundwork for us, though, to kind of understand folklore, where it comes from, how real or not real it could be. But now we want to jump into it and hear some of your best stories.
Yes.
Right?
No, okay, wait. Before the stories, though, I been listening to your podcast, and you talk in your first episode about missionaries having encounters like this where they're possessed or they experience sleep paralysis and they have some kind of encounter with an evil spirit. I had a question, and some of our listeners had this question too, is I was always taught that you can only encounter or have this kind of experience with an evil spirit if you're seeking it out. So like when you gave the example of praying to the devil, that would be seeking it out, right? But like if you're just a normal missionary doing your thing, like how is this happening to you? And I'm a little scared. So will you elaborate?
Don't be scared. So
this is something, yeah.
This is the question that Heber C. Kimball has when he had that experience I told you about. And so he writes this letter back about the experience, and Joseph Smith gets a copy, and so people know it. And then he goes back to not to Utah, to Nauvoo. And one night he gets an opportunity to go for a walk with Joseph Smith. And on the walk, he says, what was that about? Like, is there something wrong with me that I had this attack? Orson Hyde wasn't thrown across the room. I was. And Joseph says to him, like, at this moment, you were closer to God, even though you didn't recognize it, than at any other point during your mission. And so, this is why do we experience adversity? Sometimes it's because there's somebody who wants to give us adversity, right? This is it says something about and maybe it tells us that we're special, all people, but it says that maybe we're on the right path.
Yeah, the Joseph Smith experience, of course, is our perfect example, right?
Absolutely.
He heads to the grove, he kneels down to pray, and he's overtaken by a dark spirit, right? Like there's a dark feeling that enters the grove. And so, yeah, sometimes we're on the right path and that comes to us. I was thinking, Chris and I throw around this idea of a Voldemort sort of religion in which we just don't say Satan's name and then he will not appear, right? Like if we say his name, it'll invoke him and suddenly he'll enter the room. Yeah. But I don't believe in that. I do believe, like Joseph, you keep praying, right? Like we have power over Satan. We can talk about these things. We can explore these topics. We can even have fun, right? And we don't have to worry. God is with us, and and he's on our team. So,
and if you read section 76, evil spirits are already all around us, having war with us. So it's a little scary.
Yeah. That makes me feel better.
That's right.
That was comforting.
That's right.
You're already surrounded.
That's part of the mortal experience. We're gonna have this. So.
No, that's great. And it's such a great example with Joseph Smith. And, sometimes he had that experience happen, that really scary experience happen right before he literally saw God and Jesus Christ. So maybe it's happening before something good. But that leads me to my next question is, we hear a lot of these stories happening from missionaries, which makes sense because I feel like there are a lot of tales told by missionaries. But it also happened with Joseph Smith and like other general authorities. So to me, it seems like it's happening to people that are doing a lot of good and like moving the church forward. Now we're theorizing, but I'm wondering if you think that this happens to has this happened to President Nelson? Like, do you think this is happening to our prophets today?
I suspect so. Hugh Brown wrote a great memoir. And in his memoir, he talks about being called as an apostle and kind of knowing he's going to be called as an apostle before it happens. And then he has this terrible experience where he gets this Great Depression right before, and he goes and lies in his bedroom, and his wife walks into the room and kind of feels this darkness there and says, "What is this?" And he looks at her and he says, "It's the devil." And so here's a guy, modern apostle, 100 years ago, is experiencing that right then. And so I would guess this is something a lot of Latter-day Saints have encountered, including our leaders.
Whoa. Oh my gosh, that is scary. That makes me sad for them, but that's okay. They can handle it. Okay. I want to hear more stories. Like, what are some of your guys' best stories, like, relating to this?
You know, I think one of my favorite stories to tell is our stories related to possession of other individuals. So missionaries go out throughout the world, and they meet a lot of different individuals. It's very rare for a Latter-day Saint to believe that they're possessed. Now, it wasn't that rare in the 19th century. Well, it was still rare, but not rare like it is today, right? In fact, I've met Latter-day Saints who think, "Oh, we believe in possession," right? But I often like to tell a story that happened on my mission, which was related to a possession that occurred. We had and telling your own stories is a fun thing to do as a folklorist too. But we had a woman come to the mission office while I was working there. This is in Charleston, West Virginia. And she sat down and she just acted normal. She wanted someone to go talk to him. And the senior couple said, "Well, let's send the sisters over." She's a single woman. And so the sisters went over there, and that night we lived in the same apartment complex. They came over and they were really freaked out. And they had experienced what it was like to sit down with someone who at the very least believed they were possessed. And so I had the opportunity to go talk to the mission president about whether an exorcism should be performed. And the mission president said to me, "Elder Blythe, Latter-day Saints missionaries believe, we're really trusting. And so I don't want you to participate in this possession. But yeah, we're going to have Elder Cornish at the end of the hall here perform it." And then I walked down the hall, and the Elder Cornish grabbed my shoulder and said, "Come in here, Chris." And all of a sudden I was helping to perform an exorcism. In this case, it was just a simple blessing. There's all sorts of different ways and different stories people perform an exorcism. And he cast the spirit out of the office and down the street and across the road. This is like the Savior casting a spirit into the pigs, right? The idea you can kind of plan its march. Later, I went and I met with this sister, and throughout the entire experience, as we read scriptures and stuff, every time we'd pray or read scriptures, she would make hissing sounds. And so I'd stop and I'd say, "Hey, what's going on? Are you okay?" And I noticed at the end of that she stopped hissing. And so she had a lot more control once I made it awkward. And so it made me think there's different elements to these stories, right? Whereas other people in that room might go on and tell the same story as something that they were sure happened, right? This wasn't mental illness. This was definitely possession. I walked away thinking, we met a person that probably had schizophrenia. And here's a story that isn't elaborate because it doesn't leave us with the sort of great element of a scary story, right? Which is the great element like, this is real. Or, the best thing, if I would have left the house and all of a sudden a tree limb crashed as I walked out, or, I was struck with this deep fear. But sometimes it's not like that. And so some stories we tell are actually stories to debunk the fear we experience. Now you give me one that's actually scary.
All right. Okay, good story. I mentioned Ouija boards earlier. I love Ouija board stories. They appear in a lot of early LDS folklore. There's a story about a young missionary, of course, a missionary. He has a Ouija board. How? I don't know. It's not one of the approved books, but he's in his room. He opens the Ouija board and he begins speaking to an evil spirit. Just that moment, his companion, I think there are two, gaze over into the room, and they see a legion of demons entering the room, just flying through the doors. And the elders run over and they have to put their hands to the square, casting out hundreds of demons and just barely saving this elder from death. And so there's lots of variants of that particular story, but this is a favorite of mine. A sneak peek on this next episode, our Halloween episode that will be dropping here later this month. There's this great story, and this kind of gets us closer to this ghost question where ghosts and spirits seem to blend a little bit. There's this great story about a missionary, again, who for whatever reason is staying the night in this old castle. I can't remember the details here quite clearly, but he's there and he begins to have either a vision or this is actually happening, but he sees these people begin to animate, begin to kind of materialize. And little by little, he realizes that what he's seeing is a scene from a murder that occurred in this castle so many years ago. And he's able to witness, anyways, the whole scene. And so we'll tell that story on an upcoming episode.
This is so interesting. These stories are called, they're crisis apparitions is what they're called in the literature. And so sometimes you see an actual ghost and sometimes you see a scene from the past. Sometimes called the shade of the past that's going for you. And it can often be crisis, right? So something very eerie or traumatic that occurred in the past. Let me tell you a haunted story from Nauvoo.
Okay.
I actually, if you're interested in this, there's a series of them that I published with an online literary journal for Latter-day Saints called Eriantum. And I published it for an issue they did a few years called Furiantum. It's a series of Nauvoo ghost stories. But the one I really like is there's a man living in in one of there's only 9 buildings in Nauvoo that are standing before the saints arrive, right? And one of the men moves into this home and he loves this house. This is good. But he starts to get sick and he starts to get depressed. And eventually when he looks around, he says he just sees like blackness in this house. And Joseph comes over one night and says to him, brother, you either need to move from this home or you are going to die. And he does, because he's there to tell the story later on.
He moves from the home, not
he
dies.
moves from the house. Yes, he does not. But Joseph gives the warning about the idea that a place could be harmful to your health. Evil spirits in the 19th century are often associated with disease too, right? So Brigham Young makes a big deal, like when you do an exorcism, you need to use oil because you're healing someone. So there's a close tie there.
Okay, I got one more.
Wow.
All right, what you got?
Yes.
It's not a ghost story or a spirit story. Bigfoot. Can we do that?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So, we had Latter-day Saints have this kind of unique tie between Bigfoot and Cain, right? And there's a lot of folklore about this. And so there's a young troop of, what do we call them? They're the Scouts. Boy Scouts are out in the woods. They're camping. They're away from the cabin and they begin to hear a rustling in the woods. And they look over and there is this big, hairy creature standing on 2 feet. And he begins to call out to them. And the young scouts run as fast as they can with their leader back to the cabin and they slam the door shut. And the creature comes and he walks over to the cabin and he begins to bang on the door. I am Cain and I'm here to destroy your soul. And Bigfoot or Cain continues, and the scouts, they put things up against the door and they are just absolutely terrified. And their leader says, we need to pray. So they hit the ground and they begin praying. And they hear Cain climbing up the roof of the home. I am Cain, and I'm here to destroy your soul. And he gets up to the chimney. And the one of the scouts sits up from his prayer and realizes he needs to light a fire in the fireplace. So he runs over and he lights a match and throws it in. And just at that moment, Cain comes crashing down. And I don't know how this is possible, but they see his face and it burns him somehow. And he ends up climbing his way back out and down. And he ends up, you could hear him screaming in agony as he runs away. And the scouts stand up and realizes that it was prayer that led them to safety. Anyways.
So this is one of the really important points. We tell scary stories as Latter-day Saints, often because they're like mini testimonies of the power of God. Here's you have a trial, right? Joseph Smith is experiencing this real being that he can't see, but wants the destruction of himself and everybody. And by praying, the pillar of light comes and wards it off. And really, a lot of these stories are based on that, right? The priesthood or faith, which is able to conquer Satan. So I often have to explain that to students, right? Because they can be really freaked out, particularly because we're not always comfortable talking about spooky things, evil. But I really
camping now because Cain's going to climb down your chimney, so watch out.
That's right.
But now
that's
you
right.
know how to stop him.
You guys are endowed. You're set. You can handle.
Keep a fire in the chimney every night.
That's right.
It's good to know.
It's so fascinating that you bring that up of like why we as members of the church like to tell and retell these stories. It reminds me, we asked our audience if they had questions for you, and someone submitted a question along the lines of like, are we even supposed to be talking about this? Like, isn't this bad to even talk about? And I think it's just so interesting that, there's some things like in the church, like even the temple as another example where we're like, it's sacred, like just don't talk about it at all. Right. So anyway, I just wonder, why do you think, or how do you think we got here to don't talk about ghosts, don't talk about evil spirits? Like, where do you think that stemmed from, I guess?
It's a traditional belief that goes back in European culture and lots of cultures, actually. We say, speak of the devil and he appears, right? This is the classic line. And it's a folk belief that says, yeah, somehow you can invite evil by mentioning it, or, the Voldemort complex here. But I do think, if we gave an unhealthy attention, if this was your only gospel study, there'd be some problems, right?
If this is what you majored in and what you had a podcast about, then it'd be a problem.
Yes, that's
There's
right.
an issue there,
so
yes.
Christine and I might have an issue. Don't be like Christine and me. But I do think it's interesting how we've gotten like that.
But I like Chris's point, obviously, that these stories we tell also have another dimension to it. And usually that's that God conquers all, right? That we have the power of the priesthood. We have the ability to commune with God, that he will protect us. There's these great stories. Maybe if you served a mission, you were in the MTC, about these demons ascending upon the MTC, and how a legion of angels come and they're in battle. And of course, the angels win and they protect the young missionaries. And so
sometimes it's the stripling warriors that show up.
Right. Knowing that God is on
that just gave me chills. That's so cool. And I just had a realization when we were talking. So we're talking about, ghosts, angels, all these things. Okay. So if Angel Moroni came down and spoke to Joseph Smith and he used to live, is that not a ghost?
It's what the world would call a ghost, right?
Yeah.
Or was he resurrected? Does that make it different? But still he's used to live and now he's not. Well, I guess, I don't know.
So one of the early newspaper accounts that describes Moroni coming to Joseph Smith, one of these anti-Mormon ones, it writes Moroni, an angel, and then it puts in parentheses, ghost, ! To kind of say we're doing strange things. So we would never call if your grandma appeared to you in the temple, we'd never use the word ghost to describe that, right? This is S'mores, our dog. But we've
so
never
cute.
used the word ghost to describe an apparition like that. We'd always say a spirit, right? Or my
Mhm.
kindred dead, or Joseph and the scriptures in section 129, in your comment about being resurrected, he calls it just men made perfect, right? These yet to be resurrected angels versus like a perfect angel that's resurrected, right? So we've never been comfortable with that term ghost. Even when people would do, when seances got it started and they started making their inroads throughout the United States, and it even came to Utah, Brigham Young would preach against them. And he would talk about them and say, well, maybe these are spirits, but maybe there's contact with the other side, but you don't want to be part of that because they don't have the gospel. They're not going to have good information. You don't know how it's coming, all sorts of things like that. But never uses the term ghost, even though other people become real comfortable with it. It's interesting.
That's so interesting, the idea that just because someone's dead, they don't know everything. I feel like a lot of the times we assume that ghosts would just know everything, but you're right. Like, that's a good point.
They just don't have bodies. Who knows what their experiences are, right?
Oh my gosh. I guess we have to ask them.
We'll find out someday. It'll be our turn.
Your Halloween episode should end with an Ouija board session. We can't be part of that.
Does the church have a stance on Ouija boards?
Yeah.
Like, just no.
No black magic, no seances.
Right. See, and that I just think it's interesting because it's like, don't do it because we know there is real evil, right? Like, is that kind of what the stance is backed on?
I think when these statements are being produced, that's usually it. Yeah. Where people think of this as entertainment, usually.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure people
Right.
maybe. Right.
Right.
Right. I think ultimately not wanting folks to put too much attention and time into entertaining the satanic.
Yeah.
I think Ouija boards are probably just games, right? A piece of cardboard, but
We're nervous about deception. And that goes way back. You guys know the story of Hiram Page's seer stone. This idea that Joseph's receiving revelations. Hiram Page is a faithful member of the church, has his own seer stone. And Joseph, when he sees Page's revelations, he realizes that the stone is being influenced by the devil, right? And says that really boldly. Later on in 1843, we have a series of stones brought by converts from England. And Hiram Smith comes out and says, hey, all of these stones have been consecrated to the devil. And, that would be a really interesting church service to hear a prophet talk about the divination things, but we're concerned about deception, right? And so all of the emphasis we see in early church leaders is to teach us how we can get revelation and then to warn us, to try the spirits.
And if I were to speak as a believer, I'd say yes. In the same way that I believe God can use a stone or a staff or something like that to perform his work, I'm sure Satan can use a piece of cardboard and,
Sure.
A magnifying glass to influence people as well. So I'm sure it's good advice. We're not promoting anyone to use
That's
the
right.
Ouija board,
We might be
but we like to tell fun
superstitious,
stories
but-
about it.
Yes, neither are we.
Don't
For
do
the
it.
record,
But
yeah.
if you do, send us your stories.
That's right.
We once went out. I took a group of my friends. We all went out to the site of Hebron, which is an abandoned colony in southern Utah that people were sent to gather to and build up. And the town believed that they were haunted by Gadianton robbers, so that the spirits of Gadianton robbers were affecting their town. And that's why bad things would happen. People would get sick. Children would apparently be possessed. And eventually there's an earthquake that destroys the town. And people say, well, it's because of the Gadianton robbers. Thank goodness we could get out of there. But when I went there, I told my buddies, this is really exciting. I have in my bag and a Ouija board. And so when we get out here, we're going to communicate. We're going to find out what went on. Let's talk to these Gadian robbers. And these were BYU professors, and no one talked for several minutes until I said, hey guys, I was just joking. Yeah, I don't have an Ouija board, but they didn't know what to do. Like, what are we doing? Anyways.
As converts, we don't always know how to.
That's my favorite story.
That's true.
They're like, you're probably joking, but like, what if you're not? How scared should I be right now?
Mm-hmm. And do I seem like
what does he actually have in his closet though? Like, it's he probably just has clothes in his closet, but like, what if there's other stuff in there? Like, we don't really know.
We're both converts, like I've said a few times, but this last trip home to my family's house, my son found an Ouija board in the basement. And so we have a photo of him walking around with an Ouija board.
He runs upstairs. He's like, Mom, can we play the Ouija board? It's like, go put that back now.
I'm assuming it was my brother's. It was planted by sinister forces.
There you go.
Oh my gosh.
I gotta find your brother's stories for using the board.
That's right. That is right.
Send him to go talk to the Gadianton robbers.
There you go. If he's already
never
doing
thought about we can hire out for seniors.
I would love to hear some stories too about visits from like loved ones that have died. Because, we talked about like the evil spirits, but do you guys have any stories you could share about people being visited in a positive way?
Many. Absolutely. You want to go first?
Well, I don't have a story right off the top of my head, but I'm sure they'll come flooding in. And these stories are abundant, not just in Latter-day Saint culture, but all over. There's this great book by Gillian Bennett. It's called A Last Poor Ghost. She's a folklorist, and she does kind of an ethnography, a survey, talking to largely women about their experiences with deceased loved ones, husbands. And we find that even today, that most people still have that belief, right? That the spirit lives on, and that spirit can communicate with the living still. So I'm going to come to you with a story, but Chris has one fresh.
Absolutely, I do. There's this great book called the Salt Lake Temple Chronicle. It's restricted right now in the church, so you can't go to the church archive and get it, but it hasn't always been. Whoa. So copies, like quotes from it, have gone out, and it is full of, temples dedicated in 1893. We've been doing temple work in mass, for a few decades now, but this is a really big moment for us, and people are spending a lot of time in the temple. And they record it in this book, the sort of experiences they're having. And several of them, these are the first times we see people talking about being baptized and seeing children or grown-ups on the other side of the room, like walk in to the water, talk to somebody else who's there, sort of recorder on the other side of the veil, and then disappear, right? And each time you're baptized, you see this.
Okay, the one that I hear most often is sealings.
Mm-hmm.
So a man and a woman by proxy kneel down, and as the name is said, there appears a couple standing in the doorway, and they glance over, and there they are. And the performance, the ritual's done, and then they disappear, and in come the next two, and so on and so forth, until all of the sealings are completed. And I've heard this story 100 times as a convert going to the temple for the first time as a youth. So as going to do baptisms for the dead, I always imagined this, and I never saw them, right? But I always sat there looking. So when I became a folklorist and folklore archivist and had access to all of these cool stories, reading so many variants where people are, I guess, in legend having this experience, I thought, this is neat. So.
That's cool. There's a lot of these stories. One of my absolute favorite stories is from the autobiography of Parley P. Pratt. And this is an experience he had when he went to jail. Right before Liberty Jail, everybody was in Richmond Jail, right? They were moved to Liberty later, which are the famous stories of Joseph, Section 121 and 122. But in Richmond jail, Parley's there, and Joseph goes on, he's still there. And he's worried he's going to be stuck in this jail forever. And he says that one night he has his wife, who's passed away, appears to him. She just comes into the room and he records her words. Like, she talks to him and he says, how long am I going to be here? And how am I going to get out? And she like talks to him, just a few lines. And Parley takes this experience of seeing his deceased wife, and he'll talk about it a lot. He'll talk about how guardian angels are often our departed loved ones. I mean, that's his experience. And he talks about how in times of dreams, we can be in a state where we're susceptible to have communications with our departed loved ones. And I mean, these stories are all over the place. Heber J. Grant is going to lose his child, and he's really nervous. Like, he doesn't want to lose his child. He obviously, who's dying of sickness. And then he has this awareness that his wife, his deceased wife, is in the chair next to him. See it there. He doesn't see her, but he just knows. And he realizes that she's there to take care of the child. In a lot of cases, these are what the visions are. They're people that come to take others across the veil or to recognize temple work. But my favorites, my very favorite stories are appearances of the prophet Joseph Smith, who returned. I've collected over 100 pages of stories where the prophet returns and communicates with other prophets, or promises to protect people, or, to missionaries. He once appears to a missionary and, doesn't necessarily perform. He does some sort of a blessing. And the missionary, who couldn't speak the language and who had problems with his eyes, wakes up from this experience, or, Joseph disappears, however the experience happens. His eyes are fixed, and all of a sudden he starts to be able to learn the language, right? So yeah, we are a people full of great miracles.
One just popped into my mind as you're talking. So for my master's thesis, I collected stories from Latter-day Saint women who home birth. And one story was especially moving. This young woman was giving birth, and it was getting difficult as birth. You just had a baby not too long ago, so you probably remember. But she's suffering, and it's hard. And her mother had passed away. And as she's there on the floor, she's pushing, she feels her mother's touch. And I think it's that her mother places her hand on her hand. And this gives her the strength to be able to deliver her baby. And so this idea that her deceased mother was there in the room as the grandmother's grandbaby was being born, 3 generations, right? One beyond the veil, one passing through the veil, was just really powerful experience. So yeah, we have all these beautiful stories where deceased loved ones are coming back to comfort, to say, it's okay, I'm still here. I'm here with you. I'm going to continue to walk with you. And I think that those narratives are so meaningful.
This is the greatest thing. One of my favorite things about Latter-day Saint theology, just the basic, is that we're angels, right? We are angels in a certain state of progression. And so when we talk about angels visiting us, that means people that have been on earth, like our loved ones, maybe somebody with a special mission like Moroni or Peter, James, and John, but more likely
it's
Grandpa Joe, who's going to come and share something with us, or concerned about his grandchildren.
So, and some of your Latter-day Saint listeners might not be aware, probably are, but this is a unique thing to Latter-day Saints. A lot of other Christian denominations see angels as other beings. They're not people. They're not you and I, right?
Sometimes we remember, because we know that we don't think they have wings, right? Other people think they have wings. They're a different species. They're not like us.
So it's really beautiful that we get to carry on the work once we cross the veil.
Yes. I love those.
Okay, I love knowing that I'm an angel in
Yeah.
this phase of my life. You know what I mean? Like, I love that. It's so cool. But okay, I have so many questions too, because this is so interesting to me. But one thing you said about when we're sleeping, sometimes that is like the angels are able to communicate with us better. But I know also from your guys' podcast that also like sleep paralysis, and that can be an opportunity for evil spirits to also. So I'm just wondering, like, what is it about sleeping? Is it because we're just like in an unconscious state? Like, do you guys have any theories about that?
Talk about Hufford a little bit and about experiential.
So David Hufford's this great folklorist who studied sleep paralysis. And he's not a Latter-day Saint, although he did study, because Utah is such a great place to study folklore, and Utah State and BYU have these great collections in their libraries. Folklorists always come here to study, and Hufford did that. And so he writes about Latter-day Saints in his book about sleep paralysis. And he's, he doesn't know that there's actually spirits, but he knows that this is a real experience that people are having. And so it's pretty interesting, a really common experience. He thinks about 20% of people have this experience of sleep paralysis where they're where it's, you wake up and you can't move, but you also have this feeling of absolute dread and a sense that there's a presence there. Some of my students will hear these stories and will read this and they'll decide, oh, well, that means the scary thing I had was probably just something in my mind.
Physiological or
and I don't try to convince them otherwise. I do tell them, like, well, I don't know that. That's not what I said. I had a missionary. I was first called, as I tell this in the podcast, but I was called as a district leader. And like the first week of this experience, I get a phone call from an elder who's an elder from the Navajo Nation. He is great, hardworking elder. I'm still really impressed with the guy. And he's had this sleep paralysis experience. And the experience, you can check out the podcast if you want to hear the whole experience. But, our mission president kind of said, well, it's a sleep thing, don't worry about it. But his dad wrote him a letter, and the letter is really powerful. And I just remember this line from it that says, you're acting like a soldier who goes to war and realizes people are shooting real bullets. And so for this elder, this experience he had, whether it's physiological or not, really strengthened him. He realized that what he was doing was really important, and this was evidence of that. What is it about sleep that makes it so we can have these experiences? I think meditation probably too, right? Like we shut down all the stuff, the passage, be still and know I'm God. There's something in our lives, men and women go off into the mountains and fast and pray for days, or we go to the temple and we sit and we are still. And sleep is one of the only times that we really have extended periods of inactivity in some ways, right?
So I'll play on the other end of that, of course, is that when we're sleepy, we're tired, it's dark, our mind is kind of in a half dreaming state, we're kind of awake, it's the perfect, mix, right? For us to have bizarre, you never come out of a dream and you're like, am I still dreaming, or was that real, or you haven't really gained full consciousness yet. So it's not surprising that we're having bizarre experiences during the sleeping hour, right? Our minds take shape. I mean, I'm sure you've had a bizarre dream that just doesn't make sense. That's little bits and pieces of your consciousness. And so I think there's something to that. Right. But I like what you said.
The gift of dreams is also real. Latter-day Saints, we don't make as big a deal about dreams today as we did in the past, right? We don't, when you look at, I write about this a lot in a book I wrote called Terrible Revolution, but in the old days, people would actually share their dreams and then expect people to have an interpretation of them. I would say, Eric, I had this dream and there were an octopus, was doing this. And then Eric would say, that octopus means blah. And so I think we share our dreams with really close friends, and they might help us think through them. But Freud, writing in 1900, the psychologist, right, has kind of destroyed the way we think about dreams, as they're all our psychology. They're all trauma that we're working through. And even before that, we have the idea that what we eat is affecting our dreams with
The Christmas Carol.
yeah, right. There's
A
more
bit of small potato.
there's more gravy than
There
the
you go.
grave about you, he says to Marley, right? Ebenezer Scrooge. And so there's this other explanation. And so I guess the sleep does give us that perfect situation where we could dismiss something really easily. Which I'm not sure the supernatural world minds, right? There's always this agency involved in it, right? Are we going to take this seriously? And sleep provides sort of a nice setting for that.
Sleep paralysis is an interesting one because, like ghosts, it's a global phenomenon, right? It's not just Latter-day Saints or even the religious that are having interactions with spirits. There's this global phenomenon of sleep paralysis. And people are interpreting it different. Sometimes it's the old hag, right? It's a witch that's straddling your chest and trying to suffocate you. Sometimes it's a demon crawling toward your bed. It's different. It's being interpreted through a different lens, depending on who it is. But it's a global, presence is what makes it fascinating. So is it something? It could be something physiological. I cannot say that I can't dismiss that possibility. Could it be something supernatural? I can't dismiss that possibility either, though.
Right.
Wow.
We should
This
sleep
has been
more.
so fascinating.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, my mind is blown. This has been so cool. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. Did you have any other questions for them before we
No,
wrap
I
up?
think obviously, people should go watch your podcast. They'll hear lots more awesome
Yes.
stories. They'll dive more into folklore and learn all about that. But I think, for the time we have, I think we covered it great.
Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah,
This was
thank
fun.
you guys so much for coming on and for this conversation. You guys, please check out the Angels and Seer Stones podcast. It is so good. If you found any of this interesting, like each episode is kind of like a deep dive into different specific topics, and there's more on the way. So I can't wait to listen, and thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We really hope that you enjoyed the interview with Chris and Christine Blythe. Weren't they great? They're the best, and they're so nice. So go take Chris's class if you're at BYU, and let us know your thoughts. If you have any scary or happy experiences, we would love to hear them. So leave a comment below or message us on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe and rate and give us a thumbs up, all those things, so that we can reach more people. But thanks again for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Happy Halloween.
Woo!
Are you scared?
No. Are you scared? We should end it like this, like the guy on TikTok that throws his thing.
Oh, yeah.